Magandang araw! Let me share with you some of the swift notes of mine in regards to the introduction to taxation. Read with me if you are able to see my notes. Okay. Taxation is an inherent power by which the sovereign, through its law-making body, raises revenue to defray the necessary expenses of the government. Nature and characteristics of taxation are inherent in power, essentially a legislative function, subject to inherent constitutional and contractual limitations, for public purpose, strongest of all the inherent powers of the state, and subject to international treaty or committee, and generally payable in money, and also the territorial in scope. It is territorial in scope. Now, what are the theories of taxation? Number 1 is the lifeblood theory. It discusses the importance of taxation. The necessity theory or theory of taxation. Benefits protection theory. It is the basis of taxation, or also called the situs of taxation or the symbiotic relationship. What are the two aspects of taxation? Number 1, levy or imposition of the tax. Number 2 is enforcement of tax or tax administration. Levy is tax legislation or the function of the Congress, and enforcement or tax administration is the tax collection or function of the executives. The example of this one is the BIR. Now, what are the scope of legislative taxing power? The amount or rate of tax, the apportionment of the tax, kind of tax, the method of collection, proposed for its levy for public purpose, and subject to be taxed is provided within the jurisdiction, and also the situs of taxation. Tax in general, as what is meant by the National Internal Revenue Code, is an enforced proportional contribution from the persons and property levied by the lawmaking body of the state by virtue of its sovereignty in support of government or for public purpose. Now, what are the inherent limitations? We can have some mnemonics. Mine, I use TIPEND, TIPEND. But the arrangement on my notes is not depend, but whichever is your preference. The number 1 is for public purpose of the taxes, non-delegability of the taxing power, territoriality, situs of taxation, tax exemption of the government, international committee, and that's the 5 inherent limitations. Now, what are the constitutional limitations? There are quite a number of them, but I will be sharing with you some of those, which includes observance of due process of law, equal protection of law, uniformity of taxation, progressive scheme of taxation, non-imprisonment for non-payment of poll tax, or what we call as cedula, and free worship clause. Okay. What are the remedies of the state? What are the remedies of the state? Powers of the BIR are included as the remedy of the state, and also the remedies of the taxpayer.